For me, as an individual Asian American actor, it was a personal breakthrough. But for Asians, the image of Asians, it was a tremendous breakthrough. Well, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, this country was swept up in war hysteria, not unlike when 9/11 happened in this country. And we happened to look like the people who bombed Pearl Harbor. There was already, a priori to Pearl Harbor, a setting in particularly the rural areas of the West Coast. My grandparents were in farming in a small country area called Florin near Sacramento. My mother was born there. And because my grandparents were immigrants, they were denied naturalized citizenship. Any immigrant coming to the United States from any part of the world could someday aspire to become naturalized Americans, except immigrants from Asia. So from the very beginning, there was this discriminatory barrier for immigrants from Asia. And then shortly, my maternal grandparents went into farming, and they saw that Japanese immigrants were good farmers, and they became a threat to other farmers. And so they passed what was called the Alien Land Law. It didn't say anything about Asians. It merely stated that aliens ineligible to citizenship were denied land ownership in California. And later, Oregon and Washington State passed those alien land laws. And so farmers couldn't own the land that they farmed, that they developed. And they usually developed some of the worst land, being immigrants and Asian immigrants. And they, with their farming skills, developed what was considered wasteland into productive, bountiful California farmland. My mother had to go to segregated schools, inferior, obviously. And so there were all these barriers to Japanese Americans. There were organized groups like the Grange, or the Native Sons of the Golden State, or the Asian Exclusion League that was campaigning fiercely against Japanese Americans and Chinese, or Japanese immigrants and Chinese immigrants. And so that, with that setting as background, it was very easy for this government to say, well, those Japanese in this country are a threat. They might be potential saboteurs, some fifth column activities, spies. And so President Roosevelt signed what's called Executive Order 9066 on February 19, 1942. So next year will be the 70th anniversary of this hated bill and unconstitutional bill for the president to decree that anyone that is suspected of being potential enemies, and that's people who look like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor, could be summarily rounded up with no charges, no trial, no due process, a fundamental pillar of our justice system, and put in barbed wire prison camps. So I remember that morning, and in fact, I can never forget that morning. It was a terrifying morning. The previous night, my parents had packed hurriedly, and they dressed me. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, baby sister then, and they were being dressed, and I was in the living room looking out the front window, and I saw two soldiers come marching up our driveway, and I saw at the end of their rifles shiny bayonets. They stomped up to our front door at our two-bedroom home on Garnet Street in Los Angeles and banged on the front door. It was terrifying. My father answered, and we were ordered out of our home. and put onto a truck. There were other Japanese families on that truck. And we were taken downtown to Little Tokyo, the intersection of First Street and Central Avenue, which today is the plaza of the Japanese American National Museum, where the story of the Japanese American experience is told. So it's ironic that we were brought to that intersection, which eventually would become the place that tells that terrible story. From there, we were put on a bus and taken to San Anita Racetrack. We got off the bus and we were taken to the horse stables. And thinking back now, I can't imagine how degrading and humiliating it must have been for my parents to take their 3 children, one a baby, from a 2-bedroom home and told to sleep in that narrow, smelly horse stall. But for me, I was a 5-year-old kid, and I thought it was fun to sleep where the horsies sleep. I can smell the horsies. So it was a dual experience in our family. My parents' harrowing experience, and me, an innocent child. And I remember the whole internment as an adventure. We were there for a few months while the camps were being built. And then we were put on a train and transported 2/3 of the way across the country to the swamps of Arkansas. I remember the barbed wire fences and the sentry tower, the searchlight that followed me when I made the night runs from our barrack to the latrine. But, the remarkable thing about young children is that they are amazingly adaptable. And that became the normality for me. It became normal for me to line up 3 times a day to take my meals in a noisy mess hall. People complaining about the food, beef brain, what is this, It became normal for me to go with my father to bathe in a mass shower. And I began school in a barrack, a military barrack. And they taught us the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I could see the barbed wire fence and the sentry tower right outside my schoolhouse window as I recited the words, "with liberty and justice for all." Today's stinging irony, but at that time, it's what I did. It was normality. When Pearl Harbor was first bombed, young Japanese Americans, like any American, rushed to their recruitment office to volunteer to serve. They were denied service. They were called enemy non-aliens. What's a non-alien? That's a citizen. They couldn't even call us citizens then. We were enemy non-aliens. Why? Because of this. And then, a year into internment, the government realized that there's a wartime manpower shortage. And here's all this potential manpower that we've imprisoned. How do we get access to that? How do we justify that? They came up with a very sloppily worded series of questions called the loyalty questionnaire. They were primarily interested in 2 key questions. Question 27, and the whole thing had to be responded to by everyone in the camp above 17 years of age. Whether you were a 17-year-old young man or an 87-year-old immigrant lady, had to be responded, whether you were a citizen or an immigrant, male or female. Question 27 asked, will you bear arms to defend the United States of America? This being asked of an elderly immigrant lady. Preposterous. Question 28 asked, and it was one sentence, but two ideas merged together. It asked, will you swear your loyalty to the United States of America and forswear your loyalty to the Emperor of Japan? Now, to an American, for the government to assume that we have an inborn loyalty to the emperor was offensive. Just because we look like this, we have some kind of loyalty to a emperor, a man across the sea who is the leader of a nation that we're at war with. It was outrageous to be asked that. So if you said, no, I don't have a loyalty to forswear, I'm an American, then you were saying no to the first part of the question as well. Will you swear your loyalty to the United States of America? If you answered, yes, I will swear my loyalty to the United States, you were then fessing up that you had been loyal, which justified, loyal to the emperor, which justified the internment. It was a no-win question. And the amazing thing is that thousands of young men and women bit the bullet and answered yes, I will be loyal to the United States. And they went to fight for this country. The women were put into the WACS, the Women's Army Corps. The men were put into a segregated, all Japanese American unit, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which became the single most decorated unit of the war. They fought with extraordinary heroism and courage, sustained the highest combat casualty rate. My parents, when they were confronted with that, it was an anguishing decision. My mother had 3 young children. She was supposed to bear arms, leave them in the imprisonment, and fight for this country? No. She answered no to that. My mother was born in this country, but my father was born in Japan. He was an immigrant, but he was brought to this country as a boy. I think he was about 10 years old. And he was educated here, reared here in San Francisco. And he thought like an American. And yet, he was denied naturalization. My father used to say, they took my business, they took our home, they took my freedom, and now they ask these questions. The one thing I'm not going to give them is my dignity. And he answered no to question 28. And so because of that, we were categorized as disloyal, as no-nos. And we were taken from the Arkansas camp, Rower, to another camp in Northern California called Tule Lake. It was, for me, it was dramatically different because Arkansas was swampland. It was lush. It was lots of vegetation, creeks running all over between the barracks, between the barracks too, but between the blocks, they had creeks there. And it was full of insects and creatures and jungle sounds, for a 5 to 6-year-old kid. Tule Lake was the polar opposite of that. It was a desolate, dry lake bed in Northern California, right by the Oregon border. It was very cold, it was very windy. I remember tumbleweeds rolling on this, it wasn't sand, it was like gritty, hard sand. And it was very cold there and dry. So it was, from a lush, verdant area to a desolate, desert-like cold, windy place. It was a racist act, pure and simple. And it was an unconstitutional act. I mean, you can't imprison people for their race. And that's what we were imprisoned for. And yet, the extraordinary story of this is the heroism of the Japanese Americans. They weren't just fighting for mom's apple pie. They were fighting to get freedom for mom and dad and brother and sister and children. They were fighting for survival here in this country. My father wanted me to be an architect. And like a good son, I began my college studies as an architecture student up at the University of California at Berkeley. But I was back home one summer, and I didn't have a summer job. And I was a ham. I was in all the school, from grammar school on, school plays and member of the drama club and so forth. And he came across an ad saying they're casting for this casting voices for this Japanese science fiction movie. You're a ham and you don't have a summer job. Why don't you go and see if you can get hired for this? And so I auditioned and I got hired. And it was a thrilling experience. Taking it's a Japanese film, so all the dialogue's in Japanese, but we were dubbing it into English. And there were all these grizzled professionals at it. One of them was Ki Luke, the Chinese-American actor. And I watched them as they did the dubbing, and where they took a breath and where they came in very fast, said a lot of words together very quickly so that they could get it into that space when the lips were moving. And I did about not quite a dozen voices in that. And I had a lot of fun, and they paid me for it to boot. And I thought, this is what I enjoy doing, and they pay me. Little did I know, it's very difficult to make a living at it. But I decided I want to do that. Nevertheless, I went back. It was a summer a vacation period. I went back to Berkeley. But all semester long, I kept thinking, is this what I really want to be doing? And I decided I wanted to try my wings. So I came back to Los Angeles and sat down with my father, and I said, Daddy, I want to be true to myself. I don't want to have regrets later on. You know that I enjoy acting. I want to go to New York and study at the Actors Studio, where all the great actors are coming from. Marlon Brando, James Dean, Montgomery Clift, Geraldine Page, they're from the Actors Studio, and I want to study there. And then I girded my loins for a real knockdown, drag-out debate. He took me off guard. He apparently was prepared for this kind of discussion. He knew me too well. He said, all right, I knew this discussion was coming, and I want to offer you a deal. He said, you want to go to the acting school in New York. The Actors Studio is a fine, respected acting school. But when you finish there, they won't give you a diploma that says you're an educated person. So if you're going to go there, you're going to have to do it all on your own. And let me remind you, New York is a crowded, competitive, and expensive place, all on your own. However, if you must study acting in the theater, we want you to get a degree at it. At UCLA, they have a fine theater department. And when you finish there, they will give you that documentation. So if you go to UCLA, we'll subsidize you. So you choose New York on your own or UCLA with subsidy. He was too good a businessman. It was a deal I couldn't refuse, so I went with the subsidy. And so that was the first struggle. I was very lucky again in having the parents I had. They understood me, and this is extraordinary for Asian parents of that generation to allow their kid to study theater, which is an insecure arena. It's a great big throw of the dice, and yet they were willing to do that for me. I discovered later on the reason why they wanted me to have that diploma was they figured, well, George can go into teaching. Well, I showed them. It was tremendous. I was a fan of Playhouse 90 from way back. 90 minutes, original scripts written by some of the leading writers of that time. Patty Chayefsky, Reginald Rose, Rod Serling, Twilight Zone, and some of the best actors of that time, live. You know, if they made a mistake, you saw it. All of America saw it. It was the most challenging and the most substantial and the most engaging offering on television. I was an addict of Playhouse 90. And I met this agent, a Japanese-American agent, as a matter of fact, Fred Ishimoto. Again, another unusual person. I met him when I was dubbing Godzilla, no, it was Rodan at the old MGM studio. And he said, he called and said, there's an opportunity for you to do Playhouse 90. I was blown away. I mean, I never dreamt that I would be doing Playhouse 90. I auditioned and I got the part. Just like when I first saw Union Station and that soaring space, it was a brand new television studio, a television city at Fairfax and Beverly. I saw that going up. I'm a native Angelino. The Gilmore Stadium, the baseball stadium, came down, and that's where they built Television City. I was going into it. I mean, I'd never dreamt that I'd be going into it. And here were all these, you know, this labyrinthian hallways, and then you walked into this huge space. I mean, to me, today now, it's, you know, just another sound stage. But at that time, it was an amazing space. And then there's this table, and I met all the other actors that I'm going to be working with. E.G. Marshall, Harry Gardino, Dick York, and Dean Stockwell, a kid actor that I'd seen grow up. You know, it was an absolutely incredible. I mean, incredible meaning unbelievable experience for me, and I was there with them. You know, it was a thrilling first-time experience. And Nobu McCarthy, a Japanese American, had the female lead. And working with Herbie Hirschman, you know, I still remember that experience as one of the most thrilling acting experiences I had. Well, I was certainly glad. It's a series. It's continuity of employment, you know, regular employment. But yes, I saw it as a wonderful breakthrough role. I recognized it when I went up for the audition, and Gene Roddenberry explained the whole concept of the show to me. It was, you know, the 1960s was a very turbulent time. The civil rights movement was going on. The civil rights demonstrators were being hosed down or being attacked by sheriffs with their dogs. You know, it was a turbulent period, and the same thing was happening in another arena, the Vietnam War. Student protesters were literally at that campus in Ohio were being gunned down. Kent State were being gunned down. It was a terrible time where there was division and hostility and turmoil in the country. And Gene Roddenberry said, all this we've got to get over. And he wanted to create an ideal that we can strive for. And he wanted to create a spaceship Earth, or Starship Earth in the case of Star Trek, where we're all working together in concert. We have common ground. All the differences have been dealt with, and we recognize that we are all in this together. And the real adversaries are Klingons. But we're all, we all inhabit this planet Earth, and we have to find a way for us to live together. And so here we're representatives from throughout the world, this planet, Africa, Europe, North America, Asia, all working together in concert. And so that very concept, I thought, was a real breakthrough in that divided, fractured, turbulent time of the 1960s. And then for me to be selected to represent Asia was a real responsibility, I felt, and a great opportunity. Here, it was not a stereotype role. I was without an accent, part of the leadership team of the Starship Enterprise, the best helmsman in Starfleet, and that was at a time when there was this whole stereotype about Asian drivers being terrible drivers. Well, I showed them I was the best driver in the galaxy. And so on many levels, for me as an individual Asian American actor, it was a personal breakthrough. But for Asians, the image of Asians, it was a tremendous breakthrough. And for the idea of people overcoming their differences, recognizing that we all have a common challenge and that we need to work in concert, was another breakthrough concept in that America of the 1960s. We wanted to do away with stereotypes, and Asians had been saddled with that heavy stereotype, either Chinese or Japanese accents. And usually the tradition was, they were menials or the enemy or buffoons, and so the lack of an accent and that would be true of the 23rd century, we're in the 23rd century. So the accents of the Scottish accent and the Russian accents were anachronism, but there was another purpose to that. First of all, I personally like accents. They humanize a person. You get an idea of where that person's from and the richness of that language. But he wanted to represent Europe with the Scottish accent, the engineer. The 60s was also a time of the Cold War. This world divided in two by two great powers glaring at each other, threatening each other with mutual nuclear annihilation. And here, in the 23rd century of Star Trek, we are past that. And so he wanted to suggest that by having a Russian as a part of the trusted leadership team. And to do that, he wanted to have a Russian accented navigator. And so there was a purpose to those accents. And there was a purpose to my non-accent, my speaking the American lingua franca. Yeah, that did. Because, as you say, we had different directors. And each director wants to bring his or her own style and leave his own imprimatur. And they're thinking in terms of what works for the camera, what's dramatic, you know. And this one director wanted me to bring my hand up with great urgency, you know, aye, sir, or something, and get my hand to come up to the top of the console panel. When we started the series, you know, it's a whole alien setting, the Starship Enterprise, certainly to the audience, but for us too. And we had to make it look like it was something that is an extension. The console was an extension of our bodies. It's something that that's a part of us. And to make it real, and to get the audience to believe that we believe, we had to make the panel, personalize the panel. And warp 1 was here, warp 2 is there, warp 3 is there, you know, so forth. And all the other buttons for me had a definite meaning. And this director wanted me to go up there for warp 9, you know, which was not where it was. It's just like doing a Western or doing a contemporary police show, you know. You don't stop a car by going like this. You go like that, you know. And so I had to explain it that way to the director. This was like the second season, and we had established where the various warp buttons were. And the audience has gotten used to that. And so I had to explain to them that we're not just doing wild science fiction, that anything goes. We have to make it real. We have to make it believable. And we've gotten the audience to believe this, and so we can't change it. Yes, I got very positive reactions, not only at the time, but even today. People have told me, as a matter of fact, I had a speaking engagement last night to the Japanese American Citizens League, and some of the younger members came up and said, my parents told me that I was the first person, first Asian person that they saw on television that they could be proud of. And so I heard those comments back then, and I still hear them today, as recently as last night. My father kept reminding me, you know, I don't want you to do anything that would bring comments, negative comments to Asian Americans. And so I was always mindful of the fact that I had a special responsibility in the roles that I played. Jimmy Doohan used to tell me that so many people came up to me and told me that they went into engineering because they were so impressed by his inventive engineering and that he could use the laws of nature in his own way. Bill Shatner was the captain of the Enterprise. He was also the star of the show. And apparently in his contract, he had a lot of powers that we were not aware of. And he has a magnetic personality. And he has a sense of great self-importance. And so he had the perfect role for his personality. He could hold court in between shots from the very seat that he was seated in during the shot, you know. And it was a situation where I know Bill reveled in. But he's also a very creative actor, and he took every scene and tried to give it everything that he had, to magnify it and to certainly underscore the importance of his role. And so we were there as ancillary presences around him. Well, we were filming Mudd's Women then, the one where this space trader comes with a bevy of beautiful girls who are available for various purposes. And When they were on the set, it attracted a lot of the front office people visiting on the set. And one of them was John D.F. Black. And he happened to sit next to me while he was visiting on the set. And he told me that he was developing a script where Sulu gets something more than the usual Sulu activity to do. And that he loses self-control. This virus infects his inhibition, and he goes wild with a samurai sword, accosting people throughout the ship. And I said, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. But I said to him, the sword is Japanese sword, samurai sword, is consistent with my my ethnic ancestry. But I told him I am a 20th century Japanese American, and I didn't play samurai. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, I remember I was swept away by the adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. And I played Errol Flynn in my backyard. Wouldn't it be interesting if we put a fencing foil in Sulu's hands instead of a samurai sword? It's science fiction and be much more fantastical that way. And certainly a 23rd century Sulu would see his heritage as that of the heritage of the world. And so why don't we, well, what do you think of that? And he says, that sounds fascinating. Why don't we do that? Incidentally, do you fence? And you never ask an actor whether they can do anything. It's always their favorite thing to do. And I must say, I did play lots of let's pretend fencing. But I told him, oh yeah, it's my favorite hobby. I'm a practiced fencer. And so comforted by that, he went on to develop the fencing part. And that weekend, I was taking my first formal fencing lesson. Well, we're actors. Laurence Olivier said, actors lie like they're telling the truth. And that is our obligation, to create the illusion of truth. And I've been so offended, because I do speak Japanese, offended by so many Asian actors who may have a Japanese line or two, particularly during the war, Japanese generals were portrayed by Chinese American actors, and I cringed at their accents or pronunciation of certain words. I felt the importance of getting it as close to believability by the people who know that language as possible. And certainly because I felt that way about actors speaking Japanese, I felt similarly about myself if I should be playing a Chinese part or a Vietnamese part or any other Asian part. I wanted to get that as truthful as I possibly can. And certainly when I was playing a Vietnamese soldier in John Wayne's The Green Berets, I asked for a dialogue coach, and a Vietnamese gentleman whose name was Mr. Phuc, P-H-U-C. Now, can you imagine how that got pronounced by the assistant directors when they were calling for his assistance when I was working on my Vietnamese dialogue? But I worked very closely with him, and I listened to the way he read the lines. It was often phonetic. I didn't learn the language, but I tried to get it as close as I can to how he would say the line. I listened to him, and I also recorded him, and I played it almost in my sleep to get it as close to his accent as possible. I had a small role in a majority of one. Story about a distinguished, a high-born Japanese businessman who comes to New York, meets a Jewish lady from Brooklyn, and he falls in love. And on stage, it was on the Broadway stage, it was played by Sir Cedric Hardwicke and Molly Berg. Molly Berg's accent was authentic. Sir Cedric Hardwicke's accent was exotic English, British accent. I did the movie with starring Alec Guinness, again an Englishman, portraying the Japanese businessman, and Rosalind Russell playing the Brooklyn Jewish lady. He did have a Japanese dialogue coach, a very good friend of mine, and he tried to work very diligently with Alec Guinness, but he felt that it wasn't really necessary. And his dialogue coach, Bob Okazaki, was very frustrated with him. He whispered to me that he was having difficulties with him. But I had problems not only with his cavalier attitude toward the Japanese accent, or English pronounced with a high-born Japanese accent. Many aristocratic Japanese were educated in England, so the English accent is not inconsistent, but they nevertheless still have that Japanese flavor. But I had even more difficulty with the makeup that he wore. It was so heavy-handed. He looked reptilian with that layer of plaster or whatever he had on. And the way he played it with his kind of, well, again, the smile looked reptilian, you know that. Oh, it made me shiver. And that very sloppy or cavalier attitude toward the accent that he had, the whole thing was grotesque. I really did not enjoy working with him on and he was very distant. He didn't like to mingle with the crew or the cast. He immediately went back to his dressing room when he was done with the scene, and Bob would go and try to help him with his dialogue, and he would just shoo him away. He knew what he was doing. It is a fast medium. TV is a fast medium, and you have to do, especially in TV, you have to do your homework. You have to show up prepared. You have to know your dialogue. And it's funny to say that, but so many actors think that they can just kind of wing it, you know. It's really shameful. There are so many lazy actors. It's a profession. You've got to bring professionalism to it. And particularly in television, you have people that are discovered for their looks or for their background. You know, they come from the right part of the Ozarks or whatever, you know. They luck into a part, and so they feel like they can luck into a scene too. You know, okay, I get the idea, and they show up on the set. So the other actors don't know what the cue is. You know, they're gonna say it their way. You know, I think television is especially difficult because it works fast, and sometimes you have lazy actors that you have to work around. Each medium has its wonderful aspects, and it's where you lose something. I love the theater. I love the immediacy of the theater. When you step on that stage and you say something and there's a gasp that you hear immediately, or you do something and you hear the sniffle out there, or You do something or say something, and there's that immediate laugh. That is so rewarding. You don't have that in film and television. However, in film and television, you can work closer to yourself. Just looking into the lights, getting that glint in the eyeballs might move the viewer. Of course, it's like months later, or with feature films, sometimes more than a year later. You lose the immediacy, but you get that emotional potence with minimal, effort. Whereas in the theater, you have to go, like that. So you have to make it a little bigger. So each medium has its own power and its own requirements. If anything, I guess I have a preference for drama, but I like comedy too. That laugh is wonderful when you get it, in the theater, or back home. You just imagine the laugh when you're watching it on TV, or the comments that you get after that. And then with TV and movies, you get the comments not only many months later, but many years later too. People will remember certain things that you did. I'm getting comments right now from people who've seen Larry Crowne on planes. Hey, I just saw you on Larry Crowne. You were hilarious. And so, oh, you're just seeing it now? Yeah, I saw it coming from Tokyo to Chicago. A friend recently phoned me and told me, or other people that have commented on, seeing me on planes. And I did a year ago, maybe more than a year ago. So each has its own satisfaction. I'm prepared for my tombstone to read in great big bold letters, "Here lies Hikaru Sulu," and then in smaller letters, AKA George Takei. It's a given in my life. I've learned to live with it, and also to parlay it. It is something that I'm proud of. Certainly, what Star Trek meant, the message that it had, and certainly what the doors that it opened for me. And the worldwide popularity. It's a beloved show, whether it's in Austria, Vienna, Austria, where I've done conventions. I've done conventions all over Europe, all over, well, not all over Asia. In Japan, I've done 2 conventions, and I think I'm the only one, the first one certainly, to have done a convention in Brazil. And I don't think anyone else has done a convention in Latin America. So I'm proud of my association with Star Trek. I know that some have complained that they're cursed by it, but I see it as a given in my life and a wonderful trophy in my life, and one that also has been a transporter to many different worlds. I sparkled down all over Europe, sparkled down into Brazil, sparkled to Japan for Star Trek conventions, but also given me the opportunity to get access to cameras or microphones when I'm dealing with non-Star Trek activities, my political activism or my social activism, my fundraising for various charitable causes. Oh, he's a Star Trek guy, that opens the door. So it's been a great blessing, all in all. Well, I had been closeted for most of my career. It wasn't until 2005 that I spoke to the press for the first time. The press have deemed that my coming out, but I'd been quietly out for quite some time. But it was a political event that made me talk to the press about my being gay. California legislature did an extraordinary thing. Both houses passed the same-sex marriage bill. And all that was required for it to become the law of the state was the signature of the governor, a governor who campaigned on being from Hollywood, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He said, you know, I'm from Hollywood. Some of my best friends are gays and lesbians. I've worked with gays and lesbians. So I thought surely he would sign it. When he vetoed it, I felt I needed to speak out and my words needed to be authentic. I came out, but I thought that it would have a negative impact on my career, but I was willing to do that. Rather than having that, what I had expected, the reverse happened. I got many invitations to do guest shots as a gay person, as me, as George Takei, gay person. And another major breakthrough, which took a little decision making. I got a call from Howard Stern to be his official announcer. I didn't know what to make of that, but I thought, what an opportunity. Howard Stern reaches a whole different demographic. And if I want to do some advocacy, and I'd gone around the country speaking to various college students on equality for gays, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender people. But there's a whole different demographic that really is the people that we want to connect with. The people who either have an ingrained attitude from family backgrounds or religious backgrounds, or just, you know, never thought about equality for gays and lesbians. And so I accepted that opportunity, and it gave me the chance to make some comments on equality. We're bankers as well as truck drivers. We're school teachers. We're everywhere in society. In fact, we're part of your own families. We may be your dad, closeted. We're your brother or sister, or sons or daughters, nephews, nieces. We're members of your family. And what is it that causes people to have this negative reaction? And so we discussed that. And Howard Stern is a very, very progressive guy, and he is a strong supporter of equality. And I've been hearing from so many people lately, or since I started doing his show. He wanted me to be a regular on it, but I couldn't. I have my real career to pursue. So I visited him every quarter as much as I could, given my schedule. And he's accepted that. And so I've been a regular on the Howard Stern Show. And people have come up to me and said, you know, that my discussion has opened their eyes. And they've changed their attitudes and feelings. And some are producers, directors, casting people. And because the social climate is now changing, more gays and lesbians are depicted on television and movies, not as suicidal people, but as part of the community and as part of the family. And so I think that in that respect, we are making good progress. We've still got a long ways to go, but it's forward ascendance that the gay and lesbian cause is moving in. Laws are, to me, it reminds me of the barbed wire fences that confined me as a child. There are laws with sharp, hard, discriminatory barbs in them. A mixed marriage, and by mixed, I mean opposite sex marriage, provides for a lot of insurance and protections for the spouse. If one spouse passes, the Social Security benefits transfer, inheritance benefits transfer without taxation. In same-sex marriages, that's not true. We have federal laws that discriminate. People that are legitimately, legally married cannot enjoy the benefits of the equality of marriage on the federal level. So yes, attitudes change and laws will change. I want to see the diversity of races that we see on television now, and the diversity of participation in American society, and whether it be race or sexual orientation, so that we have bankers, truck drivers, school teachers, all and house husbands, as we see in Modern Family in that case, when they're same sex, one or the other has to take care of the kids in the home. My father was, despite his initial concerns, was very supportive. And one of the things that I still remember being so touched by was when Star Trek was about to be canceled after the second season. He wrote something that he had never written. He wrote a letter to NBC as a person advocating for the continuation, the pickup of a third season. Our ratings were very low, and all the handwriting was on the wall for cancellation. But some of the fans started a campaign, a letter writing campaign, to save Star Trek for another season. My father was part of that. He wrote a letter saying, and he was upfront. He said, "I'm George Takei's father, so you might consider my feelings biased." And he talked about what Star Trek was doing, the important subtext in each of the episodes, the messages that were being sent out of civil rights, of peace in the world, of the Cold War. He said, these are important messages for America to see and hear at a time like this. And what the show has done in terms of a breakthrough for Asian Americans, and certainly his son's career. But I think he said, "I think it's a show that needs to be revived, and please consider continuing with Star Trek." I was very touched and moved by that. And he succeeded. We got a third season.